Okay, well, because of that hard stop, all the more reason for us to go ahead and get things going, so, good evening, everyone, I'm gonna call this meeting of the school building committee together to order at 5:04 PM. If you would, please join me in the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I just want to extend my appreciation to everyone for carrying on without me last time. Stepfather had passed away, and then being on a plane down there and then on the plane back, caught the flu, and I literally could not get off the sofa that day, so I really appreciate the assistance. We will, Kevin was kind enough to prepare the minutes for us, and Michelle put them in the packet. I want to take a second to review them, and then I'll entertain a motion to accept.
Motion to accept the August 26th meeting minutes.
Second. So we have a motion by Mr. Reynolds, who was the second?
Second.
Any discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And I'm gonna abstain since I wasn't present. Okay. Timeline for submission items for MSBA in your packet should be the last 2 pages. You have a sheet that has the colored pencils up in the upper right-hand corner, and then some orange boxes. So for module 1, we are at the point where the educational profile has been submitted, and then the online projection was submitted. We are waiting to hear back from the MSBA in terms of their review of what we submitted. So the next 2 pieces are the maintenance documents and enrollment certification. That has to be in before day 180. And then the local authorization of funding, which is the feasibility study agreement, that has to happen before the 3rd week in January. Not sure if anybody has any questions.
Not so much a question, but I think that per their timeline, that's when it's due, but I think per our town timeline, we're looking at November's special town meeting, correct?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I met with the interim town administrator, Leo, and I met with him last Monday. And the language for the warrants is due September 23rd, which is a week from today.
The full language, or can we just do, they wanted the full language, not just the placeholder?
I interpreted Karen's language, or they were looking for, but it's a moot point, so I'll get to that. So I had given Karen a bulletin from the MSBA that has kind of just the draft language. Eliza and I talked about this, on that bulletin, and I did share it with everybody the previous week. The first portion of that bulletin is for the school committee to vote. And in that language, it says that the school committee is the borrower, and that's never been my understanding. And the town administrator's name slips my mind.
Jim Purcell.
Purcell. Yeah, Mr. Purcell agreed with me and Leo 100%. He said, you know, there's no way that the school committee would end up being the borrower, because then you have all the Rehoboth money and all that kind of stuff. And so what he told us was that he was going to talk to the council from the town just to get their authorization that we can just go with the second portion of that bulletin from the MSBA, which is the warrant language for the town meeting. And he told me that, he said, listen, he said, if you need until the 26th or what have you, we can, as long as we have a placeholder, we can fill in the blanks before we go to print. So.
Yeah, I think we have probably a little bit more time there. I think the warrant closes on the 23rd, right? So yeah, so at that point, I know, just to give an example with Community Preservation Committee, we like to do boilerplate placeholders, and then you have a couple weeks to establish the language. The language is more important before print and before presentation to the town, so.
All right, good.
So we've got a little bit of wiggle room there.
And technically, you could amend it on the floor.
Yeah,
But I think I'm still getting used to working in a town, working with towns rather than working with the city, and when it said warrant closes, I thought that meant like we had to be like signed, sealed, and delivered with our language by the 23rd. No?
that was a little bit, you just wanna, you wanna reserve your spot on the warrant.
Yeah.
And then the language can shift.
Yeah.
But there obviously is a deadline too, it's gonna be whenever the warrant is, we'll have to check in with the office and see when the warrant goes out to the townspeople, because that's obviously, we wanna probably be, well ahead of that, because it also has to go to print, plus any media outreach and any board of selectmen's meetings where it's presented, so.
If I could make a point on the warrant, I would suggest that part of the language of the warrant be something like assess existing part of the step would be assess existing structure, delineate what can be incorporated into any new structure. Because that question is going to come up. You either have to have it on the warrant or be prepared to answer that question at the town meeting. Because I guarantee the question will come up, and I think if it's embedded in that language, it would be in the warrant language, I think it would be very helpful for people to understand that this study will incorporate looking at the existing structure.
A mild
Because
explanation of
a
feasibility.
mild explanation, because it's going to come up, and we can take the edge off some of the issue.
Yeah, so I'm looking at it now, and that's a great point, because, and there is room for that. Now, just so that everybody's aware, the MSBA will make the final decision on, we have to submit the language to them as well, that's another part of the process. So we have to submit it to them, and they have to approve it. But there's.
But that, I agree, that being the case, we should put it, something like that in the language, and if they say that's not appropriate or whatever, when we go to town meeting, we best be prepared to give a detailed answer on that particular point.
Yeah, but there's a parenthetical, there's a blank in here which says paying cost of, and then insert description of the feasibility study, including the name of the school, description of location, address, and any other relevant information. So there's a placeholder for that.
Okay, great.
And just so you know, because there is something that's already come down to the fire department in their feasibility study. What Mr. Perry is talking about is included, looking at alternate choices, so the voters have come to expect that.
Well, Andy, you have to defend it on town meeting floor too, you gotta really drive it home.
But I mean, like I said, if people read that, and not to belabor a point, but if people have the opportunity to read that ahead of time, they can perhaps formulate their question a little less from an emotional standpoint.
Not only that, but they'll have a copy of it, sitting there before the vote, and so when you make reference to it, it's,
Yes.
it's right there, so makes sense for a lot of reasons.
When will MSBA weigh in on the article?
Well, that's what we have to get to next, which is because I've provided some information in the packet based on costs. And I just have to say, I talked to Eliza about this one-on-one, and I talked to Lenny about it one-on-one. I have to say that I'm a little frustrated with the MSBA because when I ask them if they make recommendations on things, they consistently say, well, you should refer to your regional agreement, well, you should refer to town council, and, they're operating a little bit like the Department of Ed operates sometimes, which is, we provide guidance, but we won't make any decisions because,
And they don't wanna be in the role of saying, well, us coming back to them and saying, well, wait a minute, you've
Yeah.
sort of recommended as a
Yeah.
guide.
I know, but
But here's the problem with that, and they get it to DPEC, and they probably were with us too. They will say something similar to the probability of getting funding be stronger with a new building rather than addition or remodel. But so that puts a scare in the voters.
But that's across the bridge when you get to it, like
Yeah,
feasibility,
exactly.
that's well after the feasibility.
yeah, that comes out in feasibility.
Yeah, like choice looking to me adapt to the feasibility, whether we choose to put it to the voters or not. Generally speaking, this new build is generally less expensive.
Yeah.
Perspective, yeah.
I mean, the thing is with the renovation, it's always a wild card. And there's always unknowns, it's unfortunately the nature of it, that can swing 20%. If you get hazmat, so you didn't know what's in the walls or whatever, I mean, that's,
And the entire building, including the uninhabited parts, have to come up to code. when you have it.
right, absolutely.
Well, I think we don't have any uninhabited parts, we've used up everything.
Yeah.
There's no basement, I guess, there's that.
We're not hiding anything, Caitlin, are you? I wish we were, but no.
So, what I'd like to do is if everybody could pull the two pages out of their packet. One has the town of Belchertown and Acton Boxborough, and then the page right after that should have a table that has Burlington, Groton, Dunstable, et cetera.
Do you have the square footage on these buildings that they were looking at? Because these fees are $1 million and $1.3 million. And this, I don't know anything about the buildings, so.
The answer is no, I don't have square footage on those, so.
While we're talking, I'll try to pull it up on MSBA's website, because they have project databases, so
Okay.
we might be able to find it.
Caitlin, your enrollment right now is low 500s?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, well, 45, we're right about, just under,
Is that count your pre-K as well?
yes.
Okay. All right, so, in terms of comparables, the table that has Burlington up at the top, you can see that they range from 750 to twice that, 1.5 million. What this sheet, the one that has the yellow highlights on it, I received that from Skanska, which is the project manager that I worked with on the Attleboro project. And what they pointed out to me was that the concern about site work for Acton Boxborough, was what bumped up the cost between that one and what the work was done at, Belchertown. Yeah, in fact,
It's probably no extent really expected.
right, and from what she told me, that's because of the fact that they planned to do the work on the site. Like, it was either gonna be, they had space next to the building, they were either gonna build new, or they were just gonna renovate, the existing building, so that's why their site costs were lower.
Well, they're probably assuming reuse of septic, all the utilities, that should be all.
Now, it's a controversial question. There's been much talk about quote unquote the road to nowhere. Will that be reviewed about another access point for the elementary and middle school? And if that be the case, would that be something that would be included in the price of the feasibility study?
Well, I think
The feasibility study wouldn't pay for any sort of construction.
No, not the construction, but looking into it.
Well, I think on the project, they would have whatever options you want them to look at. They would say, okay, here's the renovation cost and what that scope all includes.
Yep.
New septic, new whatever, new access road. If it was a new building, same profile, just different numbers, it's whatever that includes, and that may be, any number of things.
Is there another egress road that you
Yeah.
were thinking about somewhere?
Correct.
I mean, it could be built in.
That single point was mentioned in the application, right, that we only had that one.
Yeah.
That one way in,
That's true.
I mean, it's actually, when they came and did the senior site visit, that was one of the concerns of the MSBA committee was how we have buses and cars crossing one another, that whole serpentine effect and, how it's not safe, so Lenny, you hit the nail on the head if we get into feasibility, as the feasibility study develops, entrance and egress and everything like that, will be a part of each of the project, proposals. Renovation, addition renovation, new construction.
I can tell you in the Hingham number, 'cause, I'm just familiar with that building, I was consulting with them at the time that it passed. There was considerable site work because of what they built the building and what other, they had to raise the level because of a marshland at the back. So there was considerable site work on that particular project. And I'm also from the countryside, because I worked in Newton for 5 years, and the countryside was gonna be placed right next to it. That's the, and there was not as much site work to be done on that particular site.
Yeah, and I would say there may be some reflection of communities and what they have for certain goals and
Also,
Yeah.
and internal resources they had there, so, yes.
just say it's a little bit.
And when I talked to our liaison from MSBA last week, it was on a Zoom call, so I think she could read my facial expression when I asked her if, they provided any sort of insights about, picking a number. And, she said that, there is obviously flexibility to amend the number. She said the biggest thing that you have to do is you have to get your town to vote in favor of the feasibility, and if it's, if you put in a placeholder of 1.1 million and it turns around to be 1.15 million, there's a process to, have it amended.
We also have the $150,000 that was previously approved for the feasibility study, and that was in the town meeting 23, I believe.
Does anyone have a sense of what has been put aside? Because all I've heard is anecdotal.
So I think that's the only money that has been officially earmarked.
Right.
There has been the notion that we were gonna utilize the turn back
Yes.
towards this. there was the notion that we were gonna utilize the free cash that was discussed at last year's special town meeting, 250, towards this. So there's like, everything is more, the attitude of the town than it is set in stone. So that's another thing that when folks get to town meeting floor, that we need to drive home, that these funding sources have been, identified, and it's been expressed by the townspeople that they want them utilized for this purpose. Along with, another big point, just while we're talking money, is the 50% it is 50% rate reimbursement for feasibility.
Yeah.
Because essentially,
It varies, but close, yeah.
even though pulling from all the pots, we're essentially gonna, empty capital stabilization, but we know that we're gonna get a good chunk of it back. We're not gonna leave it empty if we decide that we don't move forward. So,
And that point needs to be really stressed, because if you get, from what I've been told, there's 1.5 million in stabilization. So if you take 1.3, that's gonna scare some people, unless you can reassure them that, no, we get the money back.
And that was covered in that presentation that Mr. Mullen did at one of the selectmen's
And
meetings.
Kevin, you know what you went through with CPC in the library, and how difficult that was to reassure the voters that they were gonna get the money back.
well, that's the biggest thing though, is just making sure you have factual based,
Yeah.
evidence to say this is what we're doing and we're transparent and we're fine. It's,
And to be honest too, is folks are gonna say, well, how'd you come up with that number? I don't know, that's why I asked about the square footage, because a lot of times consulting firms will say, site work aside, how complicated that is, but the building is, I don't know, 10,000 square feet, and it's so much per square foot.
Right.
So,
there's some, actually, if you don't mind,
No.
wait, because I pulled up, there's a pretty good chart on the MSBA website about current projects, like as of, certain dates. And there's some pretty huge variations, between enrollment and square footage. I mean,
Yeah,
I'm looking at, one that's 425 students, almost 100,000 square feet, that's 711,000. But then there was one that was, enrollment was just a little over 1,000 students, 167,000 square feet. That feasibility study was 575,000, so there's some pretty big variance. This spans across some dates too, so I'm sure some of the older projects are certainly were less expensive for feasibility.
Is
What,
it in one Excel file or one?
Yeah, we can, I'll bookmark this and then,
Yeah, if you can send it.
So some of the things that I ran into between Newton and my own and Medfield is Newton has a traffic study person on staff.
Yeah.
Right? So we had our own clerk of the works for 3 consecutive projects in a row that we did, so lots of overlap in there, even though the services all cost more because it's the middle of the city.
Right.
We had to test 3 different sites and look at 7 different sites in the feasibility study in Medfield. So we were doing measurements and sending people out and more perk tests and water tests on multiple sites all over. So some of those costs can be, mitigated, if you will, if a traffic study is warranted, if, site tests and that kind of stuff are warranted, more than anything. I will say that I can attest that the reimbursement check did come in and it did clear. So,
our building is 68,000 square feet, so. What I was going to do is I was gonna reach out to these school districts. I know one of these superintendents is no longer employed by them, but I was gonna reach out to these folks and ask the questions about square footage and, kind of peel away at, well, did you have significant site work costs, or, were there other aspects of it that drove it up to 1.5 as opposed to?
I can reach out to folks in Newton too, and my own law school and someone I used to work for a long time with this also.
I was gonna say, I could reach out to, I worked with Kathy, very close with Kathy, from working with her in Brockton.
Kathy?
Kathy Smith.
Oh, okay,
Smith, the countryside.
yeah, that'd be great.
do you have a scope that's been put together? Because one of the things that you go, besides getting approved up front is a design firm seeing it and going, wait a minute, they're not looking at septic, they're not looking at access improvements, you know, so that we make sure that that is part of the feasibility study scope. If we're concerned about the traffic flow, for example.
I mean, that's a question that I can ask, but it's my understanding that that's, I mean,
Standard,
it's
the standard scope.
Yeah.
Okay.
Alright. Any other questions or comments about the warrant article? Okay. Community engagement ideas and responsible members, I'll lead off on that. Caitlin and I have requested a meeting with the officers of the Dayton PTO, because we would like permission to, speak at the October 9th PTO meeting, about the project, but also, we are hoping to have the PTO help us with a grassroots effort to get school-age families to attend town meeting. We can't necessarily ask them to vote one way or another, but if we get them there and we can make a compelling case, then hopefully they would add to the yeses.
You can't, but the PTO presidents can.
Yes, they can. But I was asked to put this on there, so I don't know what other ideas folks wanted to discuss.
We talked about maybe having an open house night, or a couple open house nights at the
Yeah.
school so that people can walk through, we can, you know, show them the pluses and the negatives of the school, and why we want, you know, this feasibility study to move forward in the new school, some of the concerns.
I would say too, when you're dealing with the new building, you know, something that has some presentation of how it fits into the site and maybe some stakes out or something of that sort would
But
also.
we wouldn't have anything at that point.
You wouldn't have it.
I'm assuming you're talking about before town meeting.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
alright.
yeah.
We don't get any of that until feasibility.
But I'm going down the road,
Well,
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
just sort of thinking that if somebody says, well, wait a minute, where would you put the building? You know, you could have a sort of a general thought as to where, because one side of the middle school has already some encumbrance on it. So it limits where you can go with it, but also having some sort of sense as to, you know, we're looking at these two options for the following reasons.
Well, that's where you're gonna drive home, that's why we need the feasibility study,
Right.
you know what I mean?
Absolutely, and that
'Cause
these
at
are
that point-
professionals and that they're gonna take the town's desires
Right,
and goals and objectives and process that in a professional way to meet the regulations and all that, and you know, that we've got our ducks in a row.
Can
And
we
we
take a couple of steps back, Christine? Regarding, using the PTO to announce, advertise, et cetera. And the, to your point of, a walkthrough night, et cetera. If we want to do that, which I think we should, then we as a committee maybe should be part of that presentation, but clearly identify the negative points and the positive points, and maybe even do a couple of walkthroughs so we're not stunned when we walk through and say, oh yeah, I forgot about that or this or that, because this, to me, is setting the stage for what's to come, and I think we need to do a very, very good job of that. And I, for one, would be happy to partake in that type of thing.
I think if we did something like assign each of us a room or an area of the school,
I would say
and that way we get familiar with that area, the problems, the perks, you know, and then move them to the next room. They can go through and walk through and talk with us, and we can point out and be very familiar with each.
But we can structure that, but I think that's incredibly important to do that in a very seamless manner, you know?
yeah, and maybe have somebody like Bill, like if you ran point and we had some sort of digital presentation with the slides that we submitted as part of our statement of interest that
Yeah.
show all the deficits.
And then.
And then
walk
you can
through
kind of send
these.
everybody out to the committee,
Exactly.
like, oh, go visit.
Follow this arrow or follow me, or then walk into your area and go, oh, okay, this is this, that is that, your area, et cetera.
Absolutely, so PTO can turn it into a scavenger hunt and give away prizes.
Yeah.
Any
See how many loose concrete blocks you could find.
thoughts about weeknight, weekend? Approximate, I think we should offer two.
Yeah,
And maybe if we offer two, maybe we offer one that's through the week and we offer one that's on the weekend.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
just be aware of sports, so Saturday morning at 10
Yeah,
o'clock,
Saturday
it's
is
probably
not-
not gonna be the
Not gonna work with sports.
Yeah, I think like, you know, any, a weekday evening,
Mm.
you know, 6 o'clock, and then, you know, Saturday, maybe afternoon, 4 p.m. would probably be, because it's right, you know, kids should be done with their morning sports, but you're also before dinner, what might be
Yeah.
a possibility.
Well, do we wanna propose some dates now so that, Caitlin can put in for the building usage and
I'm always of the attitude that you wanna be the last thing people hear before they go to vote on something, so as close to a special town meeting as possible.
Yeah.
Keep it fresh in their minds.
The other thing too is if you have some either pieces of the PowerPoint presentation or something that's prepared that's maybe a scaled down, simplified version, because when, you know, if you want something that's readable,
Mhm.
but a 2-3 page kind of like summary of things, so folks, because they, you know, people are talking about this over and over again. This may be like the first time they've heard about this.
Yeah.
So, you know, like a floor plan that points out with, you know, bullets or whatever, you know, I think would be helpful.
Mark mentioned at the last meeting a one-page factual.
Those are the one page.
Yeah, one thing, so I actually found, from Winter Hill, I found a cheat sheet, an SBA process cheat sheet. So, it's 2 pages, but cheat sheets. But I just wanna focus on one thing at a time, so can we go back to dates? Kevin, I agree with you, the town meeting's the 14th.
Yeah, November 14th.
You know, so I mean, do we want Saturday the 9th? And then a day that week?
I'm away the 8th to the 13th. That's the
No,
conference to the 13th, unfortunately.
Okay,
That's our conference week also.
we're home by the 9th.
Night, yes.
To the second, I mean, that's, you know, within 2 weeks,
Yeah,
What day?
November 2nd, Saturday.
that's not gonna be like any sort of like celebration of Halloween or anything like that, right? Like
No, it shouldn't be.
Halloween's Halloween, right?
For now,
Hmm?
for now, I'm team move it to a Saturday night, but
Yeah.
for now,
We can do a trunk or treat in the parking lot.
Saturday,
That's
the
the Saturday.
second.
Retreat is the 20th, so that's one.
For the.
Having meetings and activities on the second, is that what you do?
No, there's nothing on the second, I know. It's the day of the dead.
Yeah,
The next day is the, Arts Festival, right?
Yes, which is also actually a great opportunity to do outreach.
Yeah.
Just to even if it's somebody hanging around, handing out that one pager.
That would be great after the, yeah.
We can actually probably ask Mark if he's willing to do that, because typically the selectmen will have a table there. And I know he's gonna wanna hand out information for the BP debt exclusion. So maybe, you know, it could be like, oh, you know, here's some info on both of them.
and that's on the 3rd?
That's on the 3rd.
Okay. So Caitlin, you're in town for the 2nd? Okay. So Saturday the 2nd, 4 o'clock?
Yeah,
I
that
think that's a good
makes,
time.
Okay. And then, we certainly don't wanna mess with earlier that week we don't wanna mess with Thursday.
you know,
What seems to be better, Tuesday or,
Tuesday's election day.
Yeah.
The 28th?
Oh, no.
Fifth.
Oh, I was,
Oh, you're going
I
back.
was, yeah.
Sorry.
So the
No.
29th?
Second, yeah, that week, we could do
I mean,
right too.
Doesn't matter, we could go the sixth,
Sixth,
but
Wednesday.
Eliza and I are not gonna be in town on the sixth. I would prefer to be there, so that's why I was looking at November 2nd, and then something like either the 29th or the 30th.
The 30th would be fine. Middle of the week is
I like,
fine.
I like Wednesdays,
Yeah.
yeah. What time would, you think 6 o'clock for that one?
There is professional development that teachers do after school and some do it in the building that day. It ends at 6:10,
It ends
just
at
to make
6:10.
everyone aware, yep.
Okay. Then maybe we do a 6:30 start?
Yeah, we can. I think that gives some people time to have dinner and.
Alright. So October 30, 6:30. November 2nd, 4 p.m.
Kevin, when do you set the agenda for the warrants? As far as the order? Or does it just go by the number?
It just, yeah, it's kind of random. There's a specific order based on housekeeping items.
Who numbers them?
Typically the water selectmen's office. So I actually, I have no say in
Oh,
order,
yeah.
no.
See, what I'm getting to is strategically, because of the ability to do a vote to reconsider,
Right.
you need to take.
That's such a thing of the past. Everybody, I very rarely see anybody get up and leave and vote on one issue, because I think Dayton is well aware of that capability. I wouldn't put too
Well,
much.
I have to agree with Len on that one. I would have to
We
agree.
live through the
Strategic
town hall.
placement, yeah, as,
We live through the town
when I-
hall.
when I was a selectman,
Mhm.
that happened on 3 different occasions.
Isn't necessary then.
The particular issue on the warrant, which was contentious, was voted on, people literally left, and then it was reconsidered and overturned, so I agree with that.
Especially where a lot of those parents, they don't wanna be out real late, cause they got kids to get ready for bed, that's my concern. So we gotta think about that.
Yeah, we offer childcare during the meetings, like, entertainment areas, we do a lot to try to make sure they have a lot of participation.
Yeah, we used to do that and it kind of went to the wayside. So,
Well, again, to add on to Len's point, I think we have a number of money issues coming up, and I think a placement on the warrant is strategic, like towards the end, and say, well, parents don't wanna be there, et cetera. I think, because they wanna get their children to bed, I think they would be there because we're talking a considerable amount of money, and they would wanna say yay or nay, and towards the end of the warrant, I agree.
right after the pilot agreement, we get a lull of sleep.
As long as they don't read it, just take it as written.
Something to consider.
Should we make a motion for these dates or?
I think we should, just,
So I'll make a motion that we hold open house information sessions at Dayton Elementary on Wednesday, October 30th at 6:30 p.m. and Saturday, November 2nd at 4 p.m.
Second.
alright, so we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, motion carries unanimously, thank you. Formation of subcommittees.
So we talked about having potentially different subcommittees to go through community outreach, what's we talked about, but making it so that we could break it out maybe in separate chunks.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think just on that note, like, many hands make for light work, so if we can kind of disperse if there's certain, pieces of information that committee members can work on, even if it's with a part, in part with a staff member, just to kind of help us move things along, it could be helpful, or like, you know, even community outreach stuff.
And I would advise that we do a walkthrough before the 30th.
Absolutely.
Well, that was a point, if I may, that I was gonna bring up. How do we wanna structure? I think we should discuss it right now. How do we want to structure that walkthrough? Who has the most knowledge sitting at this table about the deficiencies
Probably
in the school?
Damien, right, would probably be,
You can give us the talking points.
No, the reason, is that, I mean, could we get together with this person or persons?
Yeah.
And walk through with principal and say, okay, this is an issue, et cetera, in these areas, and then boil that down to the talking point or points that we wanna have for that particular area, and then somebody either volunteer or assign for each area and become, you know, cognizant of what the issues are in that area. Again, so it has to come across as well thought out and seamless, because if I go to a presentation and it's horrible, I don't know what's happening next, I think, well, these people don't know what they're talking about, whereas,
Yeah.
you
A
know,
lot of that work, I'm not saying that consulting with Damien and consulting with Jim Thornley, who's the head custodian, I'm not saying that working with them to get some additional detail is not a valuable exercise, but if you look at the PowerPoint that I did for the senior site visit back in September, Caitlin and I worked and we identified all the deficiencies. We put out caution tape. I mean, we really played up.
okay, then how could we move forward from that, again, to make this thing very professional? And again, the reason I keep driving home that point is very simple. If people are taken through something seamlessly, that takes away the negative aspect of these people that know what they're doing.
So I hear you, and I think that's what we have to decide. Or, you know, do we want this to be just an open house where people are stationed, or do we want a kickoff? You know, a kickoff in the gym or a kickoff in the cafeteria, where, okay, so, you know, we do a kickoff similar to what we did with the senior site visit with the MSBA, and we talk about the enrollment study that NESDEC did, and we talk about, you know, the potential building projects in town that are on the way and things like that. And then, you know, what I would suggest, because we do this for like freshman orientation at the high school, we would have certain committee members would say, okay, I'm gonna take this table and this table, you guys are coming with me. And then, you know, they take off and start hitting the different parts of the building where someone is stationed, and when that group gets there, Alicia says, okay, you know, you're now in the gymnasium. The gymnasium will not even seat the entire student body anymore. You know, these bleachers are broken, you know, that kind of stuff.
Well, and that's where, like a small, public floor plan is one page, and whether you have bullets on it or not, whatever. But I mean, you know, not everybody is gonna be as familiar as everybody else. If you haven't had kids there, you might have a 5-year-old that's coming, you know, and I'm interested and I'm enthusiastic, I wanna be behind this project. But I won't be the lost person that's in the janitor's closet by mistake, you know?
yeah, I think a map is a good point with, and if you number spots and say this is the area.
Yeah.
If I could make a suggestion,
Yeah.
maybe it would be productive, to Bob's point, if we hold because our next meeting will be prior to either of these, maybe we hold our next meeting at the school
Yeah,
and really just focus, you know, on this.
Yes.
yeah, I was gonna say, we need to do sort of a run through,
Yeah.
what the night would look like.
So really take a deep dive into the prior slides, see who's comfortable with what, and do our own little walkthrough, so at least we're somewhat familiar and.
When Jim had the initial application, did he put any of his concerns in writing? building inspector, commissioner.
I don't remember if he weighed in or not.
Certainly not him to be there.
I mean, it carries a lot of weight. I mean, there are some deficiencies over there, the people are.
The ADA coordinator can't be involved with the school district, neither can the building commissioner, I think, so I
agree.
What was that?
I said, I think if the ADA coordinator isn't involved with the school district, neither should the building commissioner. So it's its own identity, I think there's a little bit of intermingling there.
I don't think Mr. Aguiar, I don't think we consulted him on state of interest.
Okay.
I don't think so. But, you know, Caitlin and I, and Leo, and really anybody else that wants to be involved, but I don't think it has to be the entire group. I think going through with Damien and with Jim Thornley, because Jim Thornley, he's the head custodian. He wasn't able to be there the day of the senior site visit. He had a medical procedure. And, he made sure that I knew before the senior site visit that the oldest section of the building, which is that long stretch before you take a right into the modulars, that back in 2007 or 2008, they noticed that the floor was sagging. So they went in and they started to raise the floor, and as they started to raise the floor started cracking even worse. So what they did was they made the decision to just kind of prop it where it was. And Jim said, those pilings and, you know, the wood that's holding those pilings up is, you know, 15, 16 years old at this point. Like, those are starting to give way, you know, so, very, very
They
compelling.
just fixed up over summer.
Right through into the basement.
I think one thing we have sometimes do is, you know, especially when you're not dealing with technical people, is to kind of give them a, you know, this is an example of what we're talking about. And, you know, maybe it's some sort of, you know, star or something that's big enough to, so folks.
Look at Kevin Smith, somebody on there.
Wow.
I don't know. I never saw him, Karen.
Uh-oh.
No, he's still there. I see him. Now I don't know.
What's this? What is this?
There we go.
Dayton Elementary School Building Committee.
Oh, yeah, I saw that they were for the same time we were gonna be in here.
Who's that?
The building committee, the school building committee.
Oh, they're next door at prime time.
Okay.
Hi,
Hey, Mark.
guys. Hello. How we doing?
Good afternoon, Governor.
Good afternoon, Governor.
Nice to see you.